All right. Hello and welcome to today's presentation on how to master video job interviews. I am so delighted that you're here. If you're here live with me, please type in the chat room to say hello. Let me know what's your dream job and company. Special shout out to torontojobs.ca for having me back as a speaker again at the Career Conference here today. So I'm Diana YK Chan. I'm a former recruiter turned career coach, speaker, and trainer. I'm an expert at helping you differentiate your unique brand value, mastering your messages, networking, and selling with confidence. I work with mid to senior level professionals and executives to find a meaningful career, navigate change, differentiate as top talent to get hired and earn more. I've worked with hundreds of clients through my one-on-one coaching program, where I've helped clients get hired into all the top banks, top consulting firms, top tech companies, startups, CPG, and many more. For example, I have helped people get hired into top companies like Amazon, Apple, Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, SaaS, Salesforce, Credit Suisse, RBC, TELUS, Bell, and many, many more. So some of my recent success stories was just last week, I had a client who received a tech sales job in one of the tech companies with over a 90% salary increase. So nearly double, which is life-changing for her. And then the week before that, I had another client in the US who got hired into IT auditing in one of the hottest tech companies with also a huge significant salary increase as well. Another big one earlier this year was I had a software development manager who got hired into Amazon with over a six-figure salary increase. So I'm really excited to talk about video job interviews as it's on the rise. As a former recruiter for Google and for many other companies, I have conducted thousands of interviews, have screened millions of LinkedIn profiles, and seen over 20,000 resumes. So I certainly know what employers look for and how you can really differentiate to stand out. So I've been doing tons of video interview prep lately. Over a dozen of my clients are going through interviews right now in jobs such as sales, marketing, operations, security, product, all sorts of different roles right now. So I know hiring is certainly picking up. And so the reason why I want to do this topic particularly is because I've been doing tons of interviews, and I know that by making just a few adjustments, it can make a huge difference there. Okay, so are you guys ready to get started? If so, let me know that you are here. Awesome. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to cover some video setup tips, and then I'm going to walk you through some nonverbal communication tips as well. So tip number one is that you want to find a quiet and private environment. So ideally, this would be in your home office or at home. You want to avoid places like the coffee shop or even the car. Even in your car could be quiet, but it doesn't look too professional for a job interview. You want to minimize any distractions. So if you have pets or kids, ideally if can have them be out of the home, or if they're in the basement or someone to take care of them, that would be ideal because the background noise could be distracting there. Or even simple things like if you have the windows open, you may want to close that window as well during the interview to minimize any background noise there. Tip number two is to have a professional background. So this is, I would say, one of the key things that you can do that could make a huge, huge difference. So the background essentially is what's behind you here. So ideally, because you're going for a job interview, you want to have that professional vibe, like an office environment vibe. You want to stick to a neutral color type of background and really minimize what I call distraction or any messiness. I have seen, just through doing a lot of video calls right now, I've seen all sorts of backgrounds from someone being like in their storage room or in their basement and showing all like the storage boxes, which doesn't give a good impression. It may give that impression that you're not as organized or messy. So ideally, you want to stick to with either like a wall, ideally, a neutral color background. And if you do have them, for example, some books, you can add some books to the background or some plant. It just elevates the look and feel of it there. Okay. My client who was interviewing for a Shopify Originally when we first met, his background was his kitchen. And because he had like a series, like 4 to 6 interviews happening, he wanted to have a more professional background. So he essentially set up his background there where he was against a wall. And he included some elements that represent who he is, that really made it a more like a conversation starter. So for example, he's like a huge basketball fan. So he had something there that represented like basketball, and he had a bit of artwork as well that represented who he is. And that's a great conversation starter there. So there's one tip, one thing that I want you to take away today is really think about what's that background that you want to have when you go on video interviews. As studies show, it takes only 7 seconds for one to form a first impression about you. And the next thing they form is your ability to communicate effectively. So this includes that background really does matter there. Okay. Tip number 3 is to use a computer instead of a phone. When you use a computer, you're going to have better posture. The phone is good as well, but it is not as formal, I guess, for an interview in terms of for your posture, you're going to more likely to slouch. If you really don't have a computer, it's okay to use a phone, but I recommend getting a tripod. So something like this where you have a stand and that you can also elevate that phone to your eye level as well there. But I do find using a computer is better because you can also see the interviewer better as well and you can see their body language. Tip number 4, this is another huge one, is that you want to elevate your webcam, which is your laptop, to the eye level. So for me, I'm using a desktop. So therefore my webcam is already at my eye level or just above eye level. But most of the times, I think most of you are probably using a laptop where oftentimes you are probably looking down at a computer. So what I want to recommend if you have a laptop is that you want to make it at that 90-degree angle there. And raise it to the eye level by either putting some books or a shoebox beneath the laptop so it's at the eye level. Or you can get one of these laptop stands. This will make a huge difference because I've seen a lot of people where they have the screen open and they're like looking down at the person and actually does not feature your face that well. So you actually wanted to raise it to the eye level at the 90-degree angle there. Okay. Tip number 5 is all about the positioning. So this is really the distance between you and the computer and your webcam. So I recommend sitting 1 to 1.5 feet away from your computer where you're showcasing your upper body and ideally some of your hand gestures as well too. So I'm about 1.5 feet away. So I'll show you if I get a little closer. That makes me a little bit closer to the camera here. Ideally, you want to take up 1/3 of the screen. Or if I go back a little bit, you can see that I'm a bit further, right? A little bit more smaller here. Now, the other thing that you want to also keep in mind is really adjusting also your chair level as well. So for me right now, I have adjusted to the height that's more at the eye level, but I'll show you if I adjust my chair lower, you can see here that I look smaller here, and that doesn't give a strong presence when you are interviewing, okay? So you also want to consider the chair level in terms of the height there. Tip number 6 is having optimal lighting. So lighting is so key as that impacts in terms of the quality of your screen as well. So the tip here is either you want to have natural lighting where you are sitting in front of some windows to get some natural light on you. You want to avoid sitting against the windows there because that could be backlit. Now, another option is if you don't have windows is to put 2 lamps at a 45-degree angle where the lighting is on the side of your face. So I'll give you an example here. I actually have right now this lamp of mine where I took out the cover here, and you can see as I bring it closer, it is brighter, right? And so you can just put it at a 45-degree angle to give you that lighting there. I have another light on my other side here as well. And I also have like 3 bay windows, so I do have that natural light. Okay, so this really also elevates the quality of your video there. Tip number 7 is to have solid audio. This is so, so key because when you think about it during the interview, not only the interviewer is looking at the screen, looking at you, you also want to have great audio there. So a few tips is if you're going for an interview, I highly recommend wearing a headset. So for me, I have the wireless AirPods here, And I find that pretty convenient. Or you can use the ones with the wires. The one thing is that when you're using the ones with the wires, you got to be careful with your movement, because what I've noticed is that sometimes when people use the ones with the wires, when they're moving, there's a bit of that scratchy background noise there. So you want to be careful with that. The other thing is, if you're using these headsets, the one that you see here on the screen where there's a mic with the headset there, you want to also make sure that you are testing the volume and hear how you sound, whether you are too soft or too loud. Sometimes I find people with the mic that's close to the mouth that there's a lot of the echoey sound there and it's too loud there. So you want to make sure you're double checking that as well. So for me, I have a professional mic. I actually use a Yeti mic here for my audio to really have that better quality as well. I also have the audio condenser to avoid any of the puff sounds there. Okay. So that's tip number 7. Now, I know this may seem a lot, but if you're going for an interview or a job that you really want to put your best foot forward, right? This is similar to as if you're going for a job interview, whereas now everything is online. Tip number 8 is to have strong internet connection, right? If you don't have strong internet connection, it's going to impact the audio and the video as well. And it could be very frustrating for the listener there. Okay, so what you want to do is check your Wi-Fi before you go on the internet, restart your computer, make sure that anyone else at home to ask them to maybe stop using the computer or avoid doing any live streaming, playing video games, anything like that, because that would impact the speed of the internet there. Okay. Tip number 9 is to turn off any notifications. So this includes notifications on your phone. You can put it into do not disturb mode. Even if it's on silent mode, you may hear the phone like buzzing when you're getting notifications. So turn that off, as that could be distracting. Even turn off notifications on your computer there. So for example, like email notifications or any of the social media notifications, because you want to avoid any of the sound coming in that could be distracting there. Tip number 10 is to close the browsers and applications. So again, this is where you want to ensure that you have a smooth connection when you're going live on videos there. You can restart your computer, close any additional browser windows, any of the applications that you have to ensure that you have a good speed there. All right, once you got all this set up, is you want to really test, record, and practice, right? If you are new to video interviews, it is so key that you practice. I've been running networking events the last several months where people can practice their elevator pitch on Zoom with video camera. And one of the common things people talk about is just getting more comfortable speaking, to the camera lens here and be able to be more confident about it. So you have to practice. If you're new to this, practice recording your elevator pitch. Why are you interested in this opportunity? Why this role? Why you just record yourself? I just had a client last week who was going for a marketing interview for a CPG company in marketing. And it was a one-way video, a recorded interview. So meaning they gave him a set of like 7 questions to record. And he actually was very creative. He put together his answers on these Prezi slides, Prezi video, where he had his answers to the slides, and it's also showing him on screen as well. And when he showed me his recorded version of it, it was really good. And I asked him how many times did he have to practice and record himself. He said over 10 times. So he practiced over 10 takes to get to that final output where he sounded natural and confident there. Okay, so it is so key to test, record, and practice. Don't just wait till the day of. You want to test it the day before as well. The other thing to keep in mind is, anything can go wrong with tech. So you want to have a plan B. Make sure that you have the interviewer's phone number, that you can call them just in case if anything goes wrong there. The other thing to keep in mind is that you may want to check, depending on like the link that you get, is it a link that they use for reoccurring meetings? If it is, you also want to prevent attending the meeting too early because they may be using that link for another interview. So the last thing you want is have the awkwardness where you're showing up on someone else's interview time there. Okay. Tip number 12 is to move the video screen close to the webcam. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but I know for me, like I use Zoom a lot. So whenever I'm speaking to my clients or people, or when I'm on sales calls there, I will move my screen closer to the webcam. So that way it actually forces me to look at the webcam when I'm speaking. And I can also see the person on the screen that's closer to the webcam. So as it's like I'm looking at them and talking to them there. Okay, so if you have like that big video screen, you can just minimize the screen and move it closer to the webcam there. Okay, so this really just mimics that. It looks as if that you are really having this conversation. You're looking at that person during the interview process. All right, tip number 3. This is where I'm going into the whole also nonverbal communication tips and the first impression tips there, is that you want to dress for success. So I know right now, because we're still going in a pandemic, that oftentimes we're in our casual wear or maybe in our pajamas, and it's so key to dress for success there. Okay, a few tips in terms of what to dress. Keep it to more like the solid colors or the neutral colors. So colors like white, black, more like the pastel colors, the lighter colors like the blue. That all looks good on camera. You want to avoid wearing bright colors or prints as well, because it's hard on the eye there. Okay, at the end of the day, you want to feel good of how you show up. Okay. Some people ask me, do I need to wear a tie for an interview or do I need to wear a blazer? It's totally up to you, depending on the type of industry you're interviewing for. If you're interviewing for like a more formal work environment like the banks, you may want to consider wearing like a blazer to look more sharp. But if you're interviewing for, like, say, tech companies, you still want to look like business, a smart casual there. Okay. Tip number 4 is to have good posture. Okay, so this is why I recommend having a computer, because instead of a phone, you're more likely to have better posture. So you see how here in the picture that there's one here where it's probably pretty common that people use their laptop. They'll sit on like a chair with a coffee table, and most likely you're going to be like slouching when you are on a chair with a coffee table. So you really want to put it on a desk or a table where you can really have better posture there. Okay, because when you're sitting up straight, you are commanding stronger presence as well. Tip number 15 is to have upbeat mood and energy. So here's the thing, like when we're on video interviews, first of all, it takes a bit longer for people to receive our message as well. And we really need to also elevate or amp up our energy so that can really feel your presence. Because at the end of the day, you know, not only it's what you say, but it's also how you say. So the way you show up in terms of your enthusiasm, your confidence makes a huge difference there. Okay, so now, tip number 16 is that you want to look at the webcam when speaking. So this is another simple one that I would say that I've seen a lot of people when they are practicing their interviews or where they're speaking, they tend to look at the screen, right? They're looking at the person at the screen right now, like how I'm doing it, versus looking at the camera. When you're looking at the webcam when you're speaking and the person who is listening is looking at the screen, it feels like you are looking at them. So this is one of the things that I would say most people don't do, but if you do, it can make a huge difference in terms of really elevating that bond, that connection, the trust with the interviewer. So what I do, I'll give you a little tip here, is I actually have 2 Post-it notes beside my webcam. And so it really forces me to look at the camera when I'm speaking. Another little trick is I also have a picture of my kids behind my webcam there. So it reminds me to smile when I'm looking at the webcam there. So these are little tricks that you can do that can make a huge difference there. Tip number 17 is to nod and smile when listening. So this is really the body language. I can tell you from my experience as a speaker and facilitator, where I see a lot of people on camera as well, even though when they're not talking, but when they're nodding and smiling, I can feel their presence and energy as well. So this is just something that you want to remind yourself when you're in an interview, especially if it's a panel interview with like 5 or 6 people on video with you. You want to also feel that you are strong and powerful and showcase that you're actually really present and listening to them. And simple things like nodding and smiling can make a huge difference. Tip number 18 is to use hand gestures. So you probably see I use my hands a lot. And it's just to add more animation and dynamic to the conversation as well. It just feels more of your energy and presence. So if you have something important to say, use those hand gestures and it could really elevate the impact of your delivery there. So studies have shown 93% of your message impact is based on nonverbal communication. Okay, so this includes the body language and your tone of voice. So how you say what you say matters. And so this is why things like your eye contact, your smile, your facial expressions, your hand gestures would make a huge difference on the impact of your delivery. Tip number 19 is to be clear and concise. So one of the biggest challenges I see when I work with clients with interview prep is people tend to ramble or go on and on with their message. So one of the techniques you want to do here when you are speaking is to speak with structure. So this means you want to have a framework with the way you speak. So for example, when you answer motivational questions on like, why are you interested in this company? Why this role? Why you? These motivational questions, I like to use the rule of threes. So give 3 good reasons of why you're interested in this company. Then you elaborate it. And then you can maybe give a story or an insight through about the research that you've done. Okay, if you follow that framework, it makes it easier for people to take notes. So I know from my experience, when I was recruiting at Google, interviewers are required to take detailed notes. So when you actually speak with structure, it helps them to take better notes and it helps them to calibrate the results with others as well. Okay. Now, another technique is bottom lining. So this is one of my favorite techniques that I practice with my clients is to bottom line your messages. This means just being super clear and concise. Think of newspaper headline statements or punchlines. What is really that impact statement there that you want to highlight? Another technique, we talked about the speak with structure, is using the CAR model: context, action, result. Give the headline, give the steps that you took, step 1, step 2, step 3, and lastly, and then you want to give the outcome. Okay, so you follow that model. It makes it easier for people to take notes. I had a client earlier in the year when I talked about the Amazon client who got hired. He was getting tons of interviews. Before working with me, he was getting tons of interviews, but not closing. And when he got the interview with Amazon, he hired me because he noticed one of his biggest challenge was he tend to ramble a lot. So we worked on really bottom lining his key messages. And at the end, like he got the offer there. So my last tip is that you want to own your greatness with confidence. So I know interviews can be nerve-wracking, and it's so important that you own your greatness with confidence, that really believe that you have what it takes and what you have to offer. Because at the end of the day, the interviewers want to know why you're the best fit, what value that you have to offer, and what are the benefits of hiring you. So you got to really own your greatness to stand out and shine there. Okay, so I hope you find this helpful. Let me know in the comments which tip or tips that you found like really helpful that you want to remind yourself as you practice for video job interviews there. All right, if you're interested in working with me, I want to share with you an upcoming bootcamp that I am running in the fall. It's called the Ultimate Job Search Bootcamp, and it's from September 8th to October 13th. I'll be running 6 weekly group coaching, training, and practicing calls, which includes networking and mock interviews. You're also going to get a private Facebook group with weekly Q&A, office hours, and tips. And I'll be reviewing your resume, cover letter, LinkedIn profile, and elevator pitch. I'll provide you feedback as well from my expertise in recruiting. And you also get 6 online courses, which include self-discovery, personal branding, resumes, LinkedIn, networking, and interviews. You're also going to get additional 6 weeks of job search support post live calls. So in addition to those 6 weekly calls, after that, I'm also going to provide online support through the Facebook group there. If you're interested in learning more, you can email me at info@mymarketability.com. Let me know and we can set a time to chat. I will be taking some time off next week. So if you are interested, let me know after this session here. I'm happy to set out a time to chat with you there. There are limited spots for this bootcamp. And if you want to learn more, come on over to visit my website at www.mymarketability.com for a free 10-day job search mastery challenge. So if you go into my website, on the top there, you'll see a free 10-day job search mastery challenge to help you elevate your game. And if you're interested in my services, feel free to also book a one-on-one consultation call with me, and I'm happy to chat with you further there. So feel free to follow or connect with me on LinkedIn at Diana YK Chan, or check out my YouTube channel at My Marketability, where I have tons of videos and webinars where I talk about tips on like networking, job search, LinkedIn, resume, personal branding, and many, many more. All right, so we're good for time here. Any quick questions before I wrap up? Okay. Okay, so Amanda had a question. Where do you draw the line between hand gestures and excessive gesticulation? So maybe it's too many. So I think this is where you don't want to have too many, where you're using hand gestures all the time, where that's like way too much. I think it's when you want to have a specific point to you're trying to emphasize. It's that balance, right, that you want to use those hand gestures. Now, what you don't want to do is that you don't use any at all, where you sound like robotic and boring, right? And that's it's really is that you just want to add a bit more animation to it to make it more interesting. So Dennis has a question. Could you give further examples or explanation of tip number 12? Move the video screen closer to the webcam. What's a bad example of this? So I don't know if there's actually a bad example, but what I've found is it's more in terms it just helps you direct your eye level, right? So when you have the entire screen, it's actually maximized to your screen there. Most likely you tend to look at the person on the screen. So what you're trying to do is if you try it with Zoom here, if you just minimize it to the smallest, it actually forces you to look up at the screen there, okay? Oh, so another question, is a virtual background okay to use in Zoom? That's a good question. So I think I have seen people use it and it does look good. Like I've seen, for example, people use backgrounds by IKEA. They came up these like nice fancy like backgrounds for the office. The one thing you got to be careful with is that if you don't have a green screen and if you're moving a lot, your body language, you could be, what's the word? Like you may not be, if you move back and forth a lot, you may get cut off on the screen there. So it may not look as good there, but I have seen people use it in my networking events. And if you don't actually move a lot, it actually looks pretty good there. Oh, what's the perfect tone of voice during the interview? That's a great question. So I usually recommend a lower tone of voice. As studies have shown, a lower tone of voice projects more credibility there. So what you want to avoid is ending with like a high-pitched tone. So sometimes people will end with like a question mark tone, and you want to avoid that. So you want to practice having a lower or deeper tone of voice, kind of like that radio voice there. And the way to get to that, it is really practicing breathing. You want to breathe, and when you're speaking from your diaphragm versus from your throat there. Okay. What's the CAR acronym? Oh, good question. So it's contacts, action, result. Okay. Another common one is the STAR, situational, task, action, result. Okay. I like CAR just because I like the power of three, a rule there. And the way you want to think about it is contacts, which is what are the challenges that you face? What was the problem? What was the goal that you're trying to solve here? What's the purpose that you have, what problem that you're trying to solve? And the action is really the steps. So map out step 1, 2, 3, 4. A lot of times people tend to ramble when they're talking about the story. And one of the things I always want to remind people is that you want to be specific at what you did and avoid all the details. So avoid all the drama of like what this person did, what this person said, because in the interview, the interviewer is interviewing you. So you want to be specific at what did you do and how did you solve the problem. So think of hero's journey, right? There's always like an issue, a problem, and how did you as a hero solve that problem there? And what was the outcome at the end of the day? And what were the key lessons learned? One of the techniques I always talk about in interviews is that you want to do your best to connect the dots back to the role that you're interviewing for. So there's a difference of just talking about your past experience, but to take it to the next level, you really want to connect the dots back to the role itself. How can you help them achieve their goals? How can you help solve problems? Now, if you don't have that much experience in the role, okay, I've seen this a lot right now where candidates or my clients are interviewing for roles where they don't have the industry experience or they don't have all the full experience in that role. So for example, one of my clients was interviewing for a leadership development manager role that entails recruiting, coaching new grads, and working with senior management. And her background is more in learning development and recruiting. And so one of the things that I got her to do was, besides talking about past experience, is to really understand the job itself. What does it take to succeed? And break down all the core components of that job and talk about how would you approach each component. And what she did to go above and beyond was she did tons of research of interviewing people who worked at the company and put together a detailed 30, 60, 90-day plan to showcase of how she would ensure herself to get up to speed and to be successful in the job there. Okay, so I hope you find this helpful in terms of tips. Specifically today, I covered on video interviews, and I know that if you do some of these key things, it's going to make a huge, huge difference. Okay, so I look forward to connecting with you further. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn to chat further there, and sign up on go to my website to sign up for some free resources there. All right, thank you so much, everyone. I hope that this was valuable for you. Cheers.